All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Terminus, the This American Life of Extreme Metal podcasts. I am the death metal guy, a.k.a. Ira Glass.
And I'm the black metal guy, a.k.a. Ira Glass's reusable tote bag, which he takes to the organic grocery store.
Well, that's good of him, you know?
I suppose, you know.
It's a little thing, but, you know, it helps.
I suppose that's, yeah, his greater crime is his art. Yeah, so, welcome back to Terminus. We've got we've come through some strange obstacles to bring in today's episode. I just had a big move, I've told people a couple weeks ago, I'm dealing with a very dumb injury, so I currently have, basically no use of my left arm. It's coming back, but, so my friend had to help me move, and, I am currently, don't have Wi-Fi set up yet, so I am recording this from my buddy's house. So, slightly different setup today. But we are still bringing you Terminus.
Your dedication is truly saintly.
Yeah, hey. You know, oh yeah, you're gonna get some weird background noise today is what I mean. There's a pool in the neighbor's yard, and there are children playing, so you're gonna hear the sort of, the mocking sounds of children's laughter will sort of make your condition of isolation and depravity sort of sickening. Let's see. We had a big week this week.
Yeah, we did. We've got a bunch of new shit going on. First up, if anyone is... We have unfortunately made our way back to the poisoned well of social media. I just recently got our Facebook page up and running. You can check that out at Terminus Podcast for a combination of updates about the show and random shit posting. Feel free to join up there. And then the Black Metal Guy is going to be starting an IG pretty soon for all you forest-dwelling black metal weirdos. So that should be nice.
Yeah, well, we'll have that. We've already got some solid shit posts up on the Facebook. What else? So we've got, the Death Metal Guy did our first ever Terminus interview.
Oh yeah, that's true, with Oncology. Yep.
Connor from Oncology. I'm going to be recording one next week. We got to set up a time, but, with the guy from Old Mill and this record label and press in Canada that's done this kind of strange, folky black metal stuff we've covered, like the Molderion last week. Mm-hmm. So something from it with me and him coming up soon. So Terminus interview content is now going, and we've had some nice responses from fans, some new subs. Thank you. We started to get back on the routine of asking people to like and sub last week, and people liked and subbed, so thanks.
Yeah, so keep liking, subbing, and commenting, and even more exciting, we're giving you a direct way to just give us your money, which is even better than liking or subbing or commenting.
Although, just do all of them.
Yeah, do all four, please, yes.
So we both really like doing this show, and we've been putting a sort of frightening amount of time into it so far. And I think both of us would like to make it into some kind of reliable income stream where we can start building this out as a business, and see how far it can go. So that's obviously a ways away, and we're gonna have to work towards it. But we're going to start that now, and we have, by the time you hear this, they're still getting set up, but by the time you hear this, we will have both a Patreon and a Subscribe Star. So you got options, and we will have a number of different tiers from 5 to 50, so fairly customizable. And we're going to have from 3 to 50. At $3 a month, you will have access to all of our special content, right? So going up, by the time you hear this, we will have our first Terminus Prime episode up. So you'll be a Terminus Prime subscriber. And that is more sort of us talking in a somewhat more freeform way about old school stuff and still doing sampling and all that. And so the last week's episode we had, the death metal guy made me listen to None So Vile for the first time.
Yeah.
And I made him listen to Following the Voice of Blood for the first time. And we talked that over. And we're recording another one this weekend. So you'll get access to all the sort of paywall content for just $3 a month. And then we will, for anything at 5 and above, you'll have access to a Discord for the show. You'll have Discord titles corresponding to your, your patron levels, which at this point is pretty customary. Our top 2 tiers are going to be, I think, it's going to be 20 and then just jump up to 50, I think. Is that right? I think
something like that.
Yeah, we have the $50
for real, just fucking idiots.
Exactly. If you really have too much, if you're actually trying to launder money, we can help you.
Oh, dude, I'm 100% a part of that. Yeah.
Yeah. We in the top 2 tiers, we'll get to vote for the paywall show once a month, and if you actually send us $50 a month, you can just directly submit records, and we will pretty much cover them, unless it's like, I don't know. Well, it would have to be pretty. If you're giving us $50 a month,
we'll probably
be
do
Britney
anything.
Spears will do it. Yeah,
we'll do the sampling. We'll do it. We'll take it just as seriously as anything else.
It could. Oh man.
So I think that's it for housekeeping. Thanks to everyone who's been listening and who's commented and everything. So, and obviously thanks to Connor from Oncology for giving us our first interview and supporting the show. So let's get to the rundown for today.
All right.
What have we got up first?
All right, so we got a great show for you today. I think we're pretty into 3 out of 4 of these bands. And we got first for you, we've got the new. Well, this is technically your pick, right?
I think you're the one who found out they were doing a new one, but this is the band that I've listened to a lot.
Yours, right?
Yeah.
All right.
So I'll just get, okay. Yeah. So first up, we've got the new record by Prosanctus Inferi, Hypnotic Blood Art, and I think that's coming out in like just a couple days on Nuclear War Now. I've been listening to Prosanctus Inferi for a long time. I think I got into them with the Red Streams of Flesh EP, and then I've just been really into them ever since. I have a Prosanctus Inferi hoodie in my closet, so we were excited to try that out. And next up...
they've got that stream out, right? Is this?
The full album is streaming on Grizzly Butts right now. And so if you want to hear the whole record, you can there. And it's also on YouTube.
Grizzly Butts is a good, in a world where there's a real scarcity of high-quality metal media, Grizzly Butts is a good writer. He's done some really good interviews and reviews, and reviews of Serpent Column in particular. He's one of the only people who talks to that guy.
Yeah.
Solid.
So next up, we got the rejoinder to Prosanctus Inferi, which is going to be the new Incantation record, A Sect of Vile Divinities, on Relapse Records, and we'll get through that one pretty quickly. So anyway, what have you got for us today?
Today I've got a German band I've been following for a while. It's really a one-man project called Imha Tarikat, which is Turkish for, I don't know, something about destruction. I can't remember. And the new one is Sternenberster. So that's Star Destroyer, Starburster, I guess. It's an independent release, I think, for now, on digital only, which is weird because some label should be throwing money at this guy.
Oh, absolutely.
But the first EP was on Territor Possessions, which is a label that has receded a bit from the spotlight now, but was, I think, they were instrumental in sort of helping us get over that really, really rough patch for black metal started around 2006.
Yeah, right? Yeah, I would say so.
And, they were active through some of that time and started to really come to prominence in, I don't know, 2009 through 12, maybe, 2012. And a little after that. And I don't know if they ever got a really distinctive sound or band out of that. Like, there was never like the there were a bunch of bands with buzz around them, but I think it had a really important and positive effect on the scene, and they're still going.
Yeah, they just released good, consistent music.
Yeah, good, consistent, traditional black metal. So this was endorsed by Territor, which is how I found them back in the day. Mm-hmm. All right, and so the next I brought in Reverorum Ib Malacht, which is a favorite band of yours, right?
Yeah, they are. I was surprised when you chose this one, just because this is an ambitious record. This is a 90-minute record, so...
Yeah, I barely got through it all. It's, this one is Vad Inte Huvud. I don't fucking know. I wish I could say that better.
It means something along the lines of, what if, or what is 7 heads? Something like that.
And this is on a label that might be this guy's own, called Rubeus Obex, and it is Roman Catholic black metal. And we will get into figuring out where that comes from and what the hell it means and how it fits into the black metal tradition, if it does.
Yep, we will. And short version, yes, it does, and we're going to get very autistic about it. So.
Yeah, this is a really great record. So, okay, so...
Let's start up.
Prosanctus Inferi.
Hypnotic blood art. All right, so yeah, I've been listening to Prosanctus for a long time. Like I said, I think it was around 2011 I found these guys, and I just immediately became this giant fucking fan. And so what was your experience? Did you just kind of know them through me, or?
No, I think I might have, if it was 2011, yeah, maybe we found them at the same time.
Yeah.
Talking to each other. I think it was, yeah, they were getting some buzz around then, and they were kind of at a time when skronky art black death metal was very trendy, right? Beginning to be so, although it hasn't stopped since then, right?
Yeah.
You know, sort of death spell and ulcerate influenced stuff that's generally not anywhere near as good. This was a band doing sort of strangely harmonized, eerie, extremely sophisticated Black Death stuff that actually had sort of melodic ideas and the impact of blacker death metal. Is that a fair way of characterizing it?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say that really what
it had nothing to do with the DSO or ulcerate thing. It basically sort of produced a parallel universe version of something like that was way better.
I mean, really a very kind of reductive, simple, but ultimately basically accurate way to describe it is taking this Profanatica form of early Black Death and then blowing it out into this very technical kind of abstract music that still conveyed this similar, like, deranged occult atmosphere, but just made it more massive and consuming. So probably a good place to start.
Another short descriptor would be arty war metal.
Yeah,
right? In the vein of the best bands like that, like you could put it alongside Antediluvian.
Yeah, and especially on their last record, which was 2013's Noctambulant Jaws in Sempiternal Night, which I think is my favorite release by them. So let's just listen to kind of the opening minute and a half off one of the songs off that record so we can get an idea of where they're coming from before this.
so you can basically immediately hear that's a cut above just about anything else that had a Paolo Girardi cover.
Yeah. It does have probably the coolest album art ever. It's fucking, and it sounds...
Paolo...
It looks like what it sounds like.
On.
Yeah.
yeah. Looks like, interesting. It appears the dragons are coalescing out of the void.
Oh, great. So the dragons are turning into the landscape and everything's made of meat and...
I think the meat landscape is producing the dragons. That's
okay.
Sorry, yeah. The primordial chaos.
Oh, and everything has teeth. Everything has teeth.
Yes, yeah.
But it's a great articulation.
That'd be a good name for like a kind of very metal... sort of alt-rock song. Everything has teeth.
Oh, yeah, that'd be good. It could be like a noise rock band, too. But, so you can kind of hear clearly where they're coming from is very familiar there. Like, this kind of riffing style is very similar to very old Incantation. It's very similar to Profanatica or Havohe, but it's more technical. These textures are more complex, and there's a lot more...
cool chords, cool chording. There's, like, a lot of power built into the harmonies.
Yeah, there's a lot of, like, harmonic depth, which you usually didn't get off those older bands.
And it's very supple. There's very, like... which is something preserved on the new one, I think.
So let's talk about the new one with that as the context. So this is obviously a pretty substantial departure from the previous work that we're familiar with. And how would you kind of articulate that difference yourself?
Okay, I think you just cut out for a sec, but I think I heard what you said. So, so how would I articulate that difference? Well, there was, right, you could hear how that earlier clip was, it wasn't like technical death metal, but it was kind of busy. There was a lot going on in it.
Yeah. Everything
on this new one is stripped down. I love this record. This is just, to me, this is basically perfect music. And what it has is clarity of form and sort of total purity of intent and direction.
It does. It definitely does.
And there's the same kind of underlying sensibility, but stripped back and in a much more kind of, let's just listen to it. I think this is such a great beginning to the album. As soon as I heard the first riff, I was like, this is going to fucking kill.
Yeah, so let's,
here we go.
Let's go with the opening of Dark Scarp of Hell, the opening track off Hypnotic Blood Art. Well, if nothing else, that's definitely a statement of intent for the record.
I love how he stakes everything. Four-note riff. Stakes everything on that. There's not even a harmonization to it, I don't think.
I think an important thing about this record is that it's very daring, in a sense. There is a dryness and a straightforwardness to this music where there's nothing to keep this music together except for the riffs. You know what I mean? This is
and the drums.
Yeah, no, the drumming is very good, but I think ultimately...
the drum sound is like... The drum sound, you can hear the chest punch in the drum sound, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, no, the drum production's very good, but ultimately this is, and I don't mean to say this in a bad way, a record that is a slideshow of riffs, in a sense. It stands
and falls on the riffs. And he starts that... What's beautiful to me about that riff, right? I love minimalistic riffing. Oh, here's a new concept for the show. I haven't talked about this yet. We've got a lot of ideas that we've got in play, a lot bouncing back and forth.
We'll have to start a wiki with our, greater pantheon of music theory.
Eventually, yeah. I really like extremely minimal stuff, right? We talk on this show, I always talk about Discharge as a good example, or the Stooges of a certain kind of songwriting. Or Iljarn, or, whatever. Intensely economical, bare-bone stuff. These riffs, that first riff, there are so many ways that riff could have been awful.
Yeah.
And what it comes down to is minute questions of timing and little issues of phrasing, issues of his control over his picking. So, for instance, da-da. He starts the second phrase, he re-picks. It's not a continuous tremolo stream, right? Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. There's something about the guitar tone that makes it more, there's something, the deliberate pacing of it. It could have been so much worse. And one thing I like about that is it has this quality of being like, the riff to I Want to Be Your Dog, or the riff to TVI, or the riff to Protest and Survive, or Drunk with Power, or any of these things. It sounds like the first riff ever.
I know what you mean. I like that.
It sounds like this is not only does it sound like the kind of riff that is played at the beginning of a genre, right? Like Hellhammer could have fumbled their way to that riff, right?
Yeah.
Almost. Sort of. Not, but they couldn't have, right? It has that kind of, not only does it have that feeling of originariness, whatever, it feels like the first riff ever. Like someone sort of reached down into the clay on the riverbank and sort of felt something kind of cut his hand, and he pulled it out, dripping, and he was like, this is a riff. Oh,
Jesus Christ, man.
Yeah.
You can start writing for Pitchfork with that kind of shit.
Yeah, I mean, if Pitchfork read like that, it would be good. It's
No, I understand what you're saying though. It has this kind of quality to it, which is definitely a thing they keep striking at with this record, is reaching back into this very primordial style of what you would call guitar music,
Yeah.
But also what this bears a lot of resemblance to is some of the newer Profanatica stuff, which is much more kind of stately and reserved, because early Profanatica...
This album is very stately.
Yeah, it is.
It's incredibly muscular, but it's so deliberate in its timing.
It's interesting because it's a cool album, but it doesn't do something that we usually like a lot, especially with this style of kind of black death metal, which is to be very unhinged and very kind of loose. This is really tight and very tense and paranoid.
It's magisterial. Yeah, this is sort of, carefully smiting each foe with a third stroke, and with malice.
Yeah, definitely with malice.
It's mastery. There's complete mastery. I mean, and the way it rolls into that more, because at times he reaches for these sorts of riffs, he's then able to play with the momentum and the little sort of the little rhythmic dynamics he's built into them. He then just opens them out with these answering phrases. So you get that huge sort of falling kind of chug riff, which again has a kind of melodic fullness. It's structurally a Frost riff, right?
Yeah.
But it has a melodic fullness to it that was just never in Celtic Frost.
Yeah.
And I think a good stylistic word for this, in that it has this kind of dissonant 80s sort of proto-Black Death riffing, but also constantly hints at this more sort of Dorian scale noble melodicism.
There's definitely a medieval quality to a lot of it.
It's very medieval also. And a phrase you've used before that I think is great for this is 1.5 wave black metal. Right?
It's very sword oriented, definitely.
Oh, yeah. Okay, let's go to your sample.
Yeah, let's go. So, anyone who listens to the show knows that the samples that I pick tend to, in contrast to the black metal guy, he's into kind of like structures and form. I'm a little bit more into just like, what are the giant moments of a record? Mm-hmm. Now, but this is interesting because this is a record that sort of actively resists kind of huge climaxes or giant moments.
Yes.
It's very...
That's right, yeah.
It's very restricted in a sense. So I picked something...
And I had a hard time picking my highlights in some sense because that bread and butter, nuts and bolts riffing is so killer.
Yeah.
But there's nothing, very little, that like is like, hey, this is the big part.
Yeah, no,
it's very hard to pick a sample.
There are not giant riffs on this record, but I think I got something that almost approximates it. This is one of the only climactic moments on the record, and this is off the track Torture and Raped. So let's try that.
Maybe what, 2 notes on the keyboard, just like a
I think it's like a single held chord, throughout that whole passage. But it has such an outsized influence because of, and this is something they play with keyboards a little bit. It seems to only be on like the first half of the record. I think there's like a distinct division in halves on this album, although I'm not sure exactly what the idea behind it is. But what gives such a simple thing the power is the relative lack of anything like that happening on the majority of this record. This is something we'll touch on a lot when we get to Reverorum Ib Malacht, but there's a certain like kind of arduous journey kind of quality to this music where you're kind of like physically undergoing just these very dry sequences of these very kind of terse and a lot of the time just very, very abstract riffs. And then a moment like that opens up, you know?
I think I've used this expression to try to justify certain kinds of maybe music that is deliberately boring that you haven't liked as much. So this is not a deliberately boring record.
No, not in the same way.
But it has a similar... No, not at all. I mean, it's just very engaging. But what it is a test. It's, do you like riffs?
Yeah.
Do you like the elemental... extreme metal riff in its natural habitat?
Yeah, that's something to say, is like, this doesn't really like meaningfully sound like a death metal album or a black metal album. The riffs aren't really death or black metal riffs. They are primordial extreme metal riffs.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't even thought about that. Yeah. It's, one way of thinking about it I thought of, how does this sound to you? It's like, it's 1993, right? And you're hanging out, you're sort of hanging out in the high school parking lot in science class, which goes after lunch, so you're just still out in the parking lot. And you're laying low because the high school cop is sort of controlling. But you're also just you're talking with your buddy, and he's like, "Yo, bro, I heard this sick,
I traded a tape.
Dude, have you heard this fucking sick shit from Norway? It's like, it's like fucking, this band Mayhem, it's like fucking it's like, it's kind of like death metal, but like Hellhammer death metal, but it's also like fucking medieval. And it's so like, it's got like a lot of blast beats and it's really fast, but it's also like, it's epic, man. It's like fucking D&D, man. It's like the guys from D&D, but they get pussy.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would almost say
and
this.
And then you, in your head, you hear that description. And if you're some kid who's come up on early death metal, right? And like, 80s underground, and you've never heard Norwegian black metal, you might think
you might imagine like something like this. Well, I mean,
then he plays you Mayhem, and then you're like, what the fuck is this, man?
Well, I think, honestly, I mean, you're saying 93, but I feel like this poll's even older. I feel like this poll's like 88, I think it's...
So what, 88?
Yeah, I don't think this... Because does this record even have blast beats on it? Like, actual blast beats?
Yeah. But they're slower blast beats.
They're slower in that Profanatica style. They're not, like, at the tempo of even early black metal.
No, they're very deliberate blast beats.
Yeah. So, they're more like true polka beats. Like, they're...
Inverted polka beats.
Yeah, the inverted polka beat. But... Like, clearly the
I guess that's what I mean, is this kid tells you something that sounds like Norway, and what you hear sounds like 1988 in your head, because you could have no way of imagining how De Mysteriis Dom Satana sounds, or how Live in Leipzig sounds, right?
Yeah.
It's, this is very in some sense, it's even pre-big death metal records, you're right. It's pre-Altars of Madness.
Yeah, no, this doesn't, like, even Altars of Madness is much more advanced technically than this music.
Yeah.
But it's also very deliberate, because I've heard the shit that these guys are able to do, and they're playing way, way below their ability here. Like, this is
another cool thing.
This is totally deliberately designed to be slow and to have almost this awkwardness to it, But let's get to another sample from you. What have you got here?
This is just title. Oh no, I was going to do the. I again, hard to pick a sample. So I figured, since you've got another one of the kind of cool melodic riffs coming up, one of the more medieval sounding riffs, I thought I'd just go for my fucking favorite riff on the album. At least right now. It'll probably change a lot, because I can listen to this album just on repeat. But this one is on Blood Synod. So you can hear why I liked that one, right?
Yeah, and now I gotta ask you, so why is it that you haven't really ever listened to Profanatica? Like all the stuff that you're talking about, and these moments that you really like off the record are what that whole band cuts their teeth on. So it's like, that's something you really need to get into. Like,
I guess we need to do, we've been calling this sort of paywall thing where we make each other listen to classic albums, Wall of Shame.
Just like shit we should have listened to, but yeah.
That's not always going to be the format. We're going to change it up, but yeah, I should definitely Wall of Shame some Profanatica.
Yeah, it's crucial to these interests you have in this very primordial idea of black death metal, which is something that we have in common. We both love that.
I started with Havahedge, and I think when I was much younger, I just checked it out, and it was just too dissonant and eccentric for me at the time.
That's basically the art version of Profanatica.
Havahedge didn't really have the kind of noble quality that you got in a lot of the Scandi stuff, and because I wasn't listening to as much war metal and stuff then, it just didn't make as much sense to me. Does that make sense?
No, I get you. If you listen to like newer Profanatica, like it sounds like inverted church music played through old black death metal, It's great.
That sounds awesome.
Oh, it's so sick. So, the big one for me was, I think it was 2016. It was Curling Flame of Blasphemy. That was probably my favorite record of that year, by Profanatica. So,
and also, as far as that big riff on here, what I would say for our fans, we've talked on this show with Fluids, definitely, with a number of other bands since then about this notion of a pumping the shotgun riff.
Oh yeah, I heard that big slide he does in the middle of that riff. As soon as I heard that, I was like, oh, there's your charge up riff. That's why you always love that.
Yeah, you run up the fretboard to just rip down it. And we've played them in breakdowns, right? Mm-hmm. You know, it's got this bendy, we did it with None So Vile, there's a great one, right? But in the context of a big breakdown riff, you have the time and space to do sort of flamboyant stuff where your hands on the strings is what counts.
Yeah.
This guy's doing it, right? Which is just really sick.
Yeah. So let's get to this last sample, and then we can kind of talk a little bit more meta about the album as a whole. So this is off Void Called as Black Bonds.
Great title.
And there's some really interesting, very understated stuff going on guitar here. So let's just try that out real quick.
I got hypnotized by the hypnotic blood.
All right, so that segment really grabbed me. Just because
I couldn't. You cut out for a sec. Would you repeat that for me?
Yeah, I'll restart from here. Yeah. So that whole segment is really fascinating from a guitar perspective, just because there's so much detail and so much tiny variation going on every time we keep coming back to these simple phrases. And that's, I think that's a lot of what's going on this record that makes it so interesting is it's probably even harder to detect in certain places, but these tiny variations that are building up to making these simple kind of blocky riffs into something much more abstract and weird. You know?
Yeah, this is just far beyond the, he could have made a hyper-competently executed kind of Hellhand album or whatever, or Celtic Frost Tribute, and this is just so light years beyond that. I mean, this has nothing to do with the stylistic ghetto of old school 80s shit, right?
Yeah, no, it like the technique that is being used a lot of this owes to the 80s, but the basic forms, but the way he's playing guitar is cutting edge. Right? Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at is like we're not trying to imitate the 80s, but we're using that as a direct inspiration, and it's like we're skipping the intervening years. We're going from 88 to 2020. We're ignoring everything that happened in between there.
Yeah, you're creating, as we talked about on the last show, you're creating from within 1988. Yeah. But also in 2020, you're bringing, you're sort of, it's not just, this would be great if it sounded like it could have been written in 88 and been original and distinctive, but it's not just like that. It's also just totally relevant. So this is, I mean, in some sense, this is in terms of grading bands for originality, this is a very, I don't know if anybody else, maybe A plus would be, this initiates a whole new style. I don't know if anyone could imitate this in any productive way.
Yeah, where do you go with it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'd love if you recorded a little more like his older stuff in some sense, right?
Yeah.
Here, but before we go to the summary comments, what I wanted to say, you said the phrases you said about that riff, right? There's so much detail in these little phrases. Listening to this record, I thought about something. I was like, why is it that, I mean, because I think one of the theses of Terminus, right, that the ongoing conceit of our show is basically we're living in really good times for extreme metal.
Yeah, we are.
There were some dark years, but I think there's been an interesting thing where, like, maybe it was like, in part it was the internet, I think. And in part it was sort of alternative culture Inc. discovering extreme metal. And in part it was a lot of things. But, the music heads of dark times, and also it was metal's own fault, right? You know, you got the horrible, you know, keyboard bands in the late 90s and whatever. But this new style, like, people are listening to the old stuff, understand new interesting things with it. And one thing they're doing is, I think, a technical innovation that's subtle and that has legs. It's not just some add-on, which is phrasing as a way of writing metal riffs. Like, metal riffs, we've talked about hybrid riffs on this show that sort of have different styles within one.
Yeah.
But everything on this record is all one style. But it's got it's riffs that have these little phrases within them, distinct phrases that aren't just like a, you know what I mean?
No,
like,
I understand.
I think phrasing as a method of riff composition was not, or like, say, changing the picking within the riff to make these, or just, changing the touch, changing rhythm within a riff was not as big of a thing back in the day, right?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of this comes down to, well, one, it's very obvious that Jake Cohn, the kind of the main, like, guy who's always been the central guy in this band, he's got a completely different way of writing riffs. Like, he's got, like, an idiosyncratic guitar style, which lends itself to engineering. We had a conversation last night where we were talking about the differences in writing, and I was talking about using the sentence as the fundamental unit of writing rather than the word. You remember that?
Oh, yeah, sure. Okay, yeah, now I remember. Yep.
I think there's an almost similar idea here where these are riffs built off these 3 or 4 note sentences, and then he's constructing paragraphs around them. He's using these little, like, 3 or 4 note phrases that he's building these sort of songs or riff ideas around, rather, because he's not doing just these, like, dissonant wide interval things you would hear from Havohay or something. Mm-hmm. They're these little considered ideas that then abruptly change direction, giving it this intensely abstract kind of weird sound. It's a very different approach to writing metal riffs.
I think as far as other bands that have sort of mastered phrasing as a way of riff construction that we've covered, I mean, I think there have been a lot of the better bands we've covered have done that in one way or another. Lytisha and Holocaust immediately comes to mind. It's my black metal band. Bands that have this kind of fully developed, it sounds almost like it parallels classical or folk music because there's a naturalness to it. Even when it sounds nothing like that. But it sounds like there's a naturalness to it that's different from the kind of deliberate artifice of, like, you know, which is that's I'm the Black Wizards, but yeah. So like, I mean, I know you're a fan of his more. His older stuff sounds great to me, and I'm going to go back and listen to more. For me, this is just a wonderful album, and I'm going to listen to it on repeat for the rest of my life, probably. But what do you think about where it stands? Where should he go from here?
Well, it's hard to tell. You know, this is a case where I think this is really good. At the same time, I was such a big fan of the older direction of this band. And,
that's reasonable.
I'm so, like, pretty deeply connected with it. I think as far as, like, active kind of contemporary bands go, Prosanctus is in, like, my top 10. So I was just so wedded to, like, Noctambulous Jaws and Red Streams of Flesh. I can't help but be slightly disappointed just because this is so different, and I understand that's a personal hang-up of mine. But if I was to get a little bit more critical, I would say, I think, well, okay, critical, but also where can we take this style? One, we care more about production. I understand the purpose of this very dry, very just like kind of wooden production, but at the same time, I see it as sort of a missed opportunity because I love that kind of swirling quality of older Prosanctus stuff. There's a quality to this record where I feel like if you're not paying that much attention to kind of like tone color and you're not going to pay attention to the production, then you've got something that's kind of like you can read this on sheet music and it gives you a similar effect. You know what
you mean. You know what? I don't know about on sheet music because it's so physical, but very physical music. But I think this music, I think all music does this, but this music very clearly sort of, or all good music. This music exists in sort of abstract space too. Yeah. Right? It's like this is the riff pre-exists. These riffs have a reality to them. The riffs exist before back to existing after you stop hearing them.
Yeah.
And there's something, and that sort of extreme clarity about them. They just are. He's just showing you the pattern.
Yeah.
I think that's thinking about issues of form and stuff will be something I'm coming back to today all the time. But yes, I agree. I understand what you mean. I mean, I think to be. Since I've been so positive, to build out your criticism, fairness to you, and you're on your side, right?
Yeah.
There's a way of criticizing something that's like, well, what this is awesome, but why not this and?
Yeah, I mean, that is really...
It's like and one thing you could say for a new direction is just, okay, production, but also in another, why not this and? Okay, this is what he's got is a really good bass core riffing style. What if you used this to make music that also had some huge dramatic moments in it?
Yeah, I'm not even going to really complain. Obviously, I like very kind of dramatic, kind of arch music, but I understand the minimal presentation of this. There's clearly a statement being made here. And
yeah.
I can't bring myself to complain about that because that just feels kind of unfair. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So overall, I do like it a lot. I think it's really good. I see this almost as more of a rejoinder to Havohe in a lot of ways, compared to this sort of like pure post-Profanatica style of the earlier stuff. But I think I'm just really interested to see where he goes from here, because this is a dramatic kind of change in direction, and I just want to see kind of where he takes it down the road.
Yeah, cool. All right, cool. Great record. Fun record. We like it.
Yeah.
And now we will be back after a short break with our jaundiced take on the new Incantation.
Yeah, indeed. All right, we'll be right back. All right, we're back. All right, okay, Incantation, Sect of Defiled Divinities. This is... So I'm a huge, longtime Incantation fan. Really love that band to death. I have been in a couple Incantation clone bands. I don't know, how into Incantation are you?
I like that slow riff on Onward to Golgotha.
Well, there's a few of those, but okay.
Yeah, I gotta say, man, I know what Incantation sounds like. I probably tried Onward to Golgotha in my early 20s when I was doing more OSDM and didn't like it.
Yeah, okay.
And I tried it a few months ago, and it was like, oh, shit, this is great, but I probably had to turn it off within 10 minutes because, whatever, I was probably, like, cooking breakfast or something.
Okay, I gotcha. So you're not, super familiar.
I basically never heard Onward to Golgotha. Yeah.
Yeah, well, okay, well, we're clearly going to have a discussion about that at one point. But, so, here's kind of the best way I figured to talk about this record. So, we've got one song, which is kind of the lead single off this album, called, propitiation or propitiation, something like that.
Propitiation, yeah.
And we're going to compare that to a track from Onward to Golgotha called Christening the Afterbirth, because clearly propitiation is an attempt to remake Christening the Afterbirth. So here's what we're going to do. And this is going to be the paradigm for the whole record. I assure you, while we talk about these two songs, you can apply to everything. So let us just start by listening to the opening couple minutes of Propitiation. Did you like that opening 2 minutes where literally nothing happens? Were you not a fan of that? Where nothing happens in the song and it's just motionless like
what are you talking about? There's a sick fucking blues riff.
Yeah, it's funny because we were talking during the song and I said the whole album is like a Pantera album, and you say, we wish it was a Pantera album, and that's true. Things happen on Pantera songs. Nothing fucking happens in any of the songs off the new Incantation record. They sit, and they mumble, and they just kind of... I don't...
It's incredible, yeah.
I'm so fucking mad about this fucking album.
The big moment when the riff comes in, it's the power chord tremolo version of the shit riff that opened the song.
Oh, yeah.
There is, you know what it made me, this happens so much on this record, riffs like that, these shitty, like, bottom barrel bluesy rock riffs. And they're like, introspective bluesy. It's not even like, and you know what it made me think? It made me think, somewhere there's a record here, but it's not this record. There's the idea of incantation, or sort of like old guy OSDM with blues, would be like the death metal version of a 21st century noir detective novel set in Cleveland or Cincinnati, where it's like, you know, I knew the dame was trouble as soon as she walked into the diner. I was like pouring the old granddad in my coffee, she turned around, I could see the Black Widow tattoo on the small of her back.
And that's great. How about this? If you want your blues and metal, why don't you just listen to Crowbar, a good band? How about you not listen to Incantation, a classic legendary death metal band, destroy their own legacy by playing fucking bar rock?
How about you listen to Kvelertak, an excellent rock band?
Yeah, exactly. I don't even have a problem with a metal band.
Or Pantera, as we say. Or
a very good rock band.
I Hate God, which is a great metal band.
Like all these are examples of better things you could be listening to than this. But more to the point, let's listen to an old legendary track from Incantation where they're doing a very similar thing with a very slow, stately intro, but things happen. So let's listen to the first couple minutes off Christening the Afterbirth from Onward to Golgotha.
All right.
Wow, that's actually good, isn't it?
You know what really brings home to me how bad that riff before was?
Yeah.
Was that I really regret having heard it right before I heard this excellent track, this excellent, you know what I mean?
And, but the thing I
like,
really
because you can hear, it is, as you were saying when we were listening to it, it's the same basic, the propitiation is clearly a rewrite of that kind of bluesy, double part riff at the beginning of this song.
Yeah.
Da.
That's the thing I really want to emphasize, is that's still a pentatonic riff at its core.
Yeah, and it sounds, and there is something hidden in there. We've talked about pentatonic riffs and, you know, whether it's coming from bluegrass or blues or, you know, whatever. Pentatonic riffing is a characteristically American thing, right? So here, on Christening the Afterbirth, you have hidden in this crushing work of early death metal an elemental American garage punk riff, right? Or blues rock riff, right? But it's, it's developed in a completely different way, right?
Yeah, there's actually really sophisticated things happening in that slow riff where, you know, it's just moving in these bizarre angular directions that you've never really heard before.
When they start doing that, they start doing a kind of thing where they, around 50 seconds, where they sort of draw out the note in a frosty way, but they're doing it with these horrible disharmonized leads.
Oh, yeah, that's
really cool. Obviously, the pinch harmonics are fucking, you know, brutal.
Yeah, it's like, it's an incredibly advanced thing. You got to imagine Onward to Golgotha was like fucking 91, I think. You know, think about 92 apparently. So think about just how advanced that is and how some of the techniques used there are now just enormous parts of death metal. Yeah, and really most of the people are not doing it much more sophisticated than they were doing back in 92, you know? That's how far ahead they were. So that's...
Yeah, well, that's always how I think in some sense, it's always how the bands at the original... you know, I mean, listen to anybody who rips off a Gorgoroth riff versus Gorgoroth riff.
Oh, yeah.
Right? There's just so much, that's why we talk about, like, returning to the origin for this sort of energy, because it's like, there are all these little strands of it that get developed in different ways by different people, and there are all these simplifications of the style, or people glom onto one thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Incantation is still potent. Right?
Yeah, and I guess, and the whole reason we decided to just do this comparison is because, well, you know, we'll play a little bit more from each of these songs, but there's really, in Sect of Vile Divinities, there's no fucking ideas on this album. There's no narrative. There's no, they're literally meaningless riffs strung together.
There are a lot of things that you could class as Incantation riffs, but it's not clear to me why I should listen to Incantation playing them as opposed to some other shit-tier Caverncore band.
Yeah, exactly. But the reality is, this newer version, it doesn't actually sound like Incantation. It sounds like...
Yeah, it sounds like somebody doing a, quote, Incantation riff.
Actually, you know, here's the damning thing. You know what it sounds like? It sounds like New Obituary. It's
cool.
fucking trucker hat rock death metal for people who are too drunk at your local to understand the difference between the two.
Yeah, just have some fun, man. Just loosen up, man. Just fucking Baroness, man. Fucking municipal waste, bro.
Yeah, I really like, dude, I really like how fucking heavy the growls are. And,
dude, I just like Incantation, man, so I just like everything they put out, and I put it in my ears instead of their old stuff.
Dude, I just wish that, when they sell, their merch at the shows, I hope they've got their logo on, like, a camo long sleeve. You know, like...
Camo long sleeve, yeah. You know, there is one good riff on this album, and I'll just describe it. We won't bother looking for it. It's some sort of riff it's not great, but it's like an extreme example of hybrid riffing. There are like 4 different kind of techniques or ideas going into this one kind of frantic, fast, blasted riff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, that sounds pretty insane.
Yeah, there were a couple decent blast riffs, but they're at the service of fucking terrible songs.
Oh god, yes. I mean, you know, it's like being... Yeah, it's in the middle of a album by Incantation. You do not want to feel like you're stuck in a bad diner in Columbus, Ohio, right?
Yeah.
With no hot girl with a tramp stamp with a Black Widow on it.
And
right?
I know what a lot of you listening are probably thinking. You're thinking, oh, you know, that's a fluke. That's just the slow part. Let's compare some fast stuff side by side. So perfect. At almost the same timestamps on both songs, which should be a big fucking indicator, let's just play each of these for another minute and see what happens after the slow intro. So let's start with Propitiation.
Oh boy.
Let's just run it for a minute, let's say.
Where do we want to start it?
We're at about 2:05.
Oh, got it. Okay, just keep going.
Yeah, just keep going for another minute.
Here the lyric video shows you all the lyrics so you can see that they rhyme.
And that, like, the meter's all fucked up and lines don't end when they should.
Yeah, it's not even good rhyming lyrics. It's, and it's just like he read, like, the Bullock part from the Bible, or probably just remembered it.
He read about it on Wikipedia.
Yeah.
This sounds like a death metal album written by people who read about death metal on fucking Wikipedia and decided to start a band.
I will say I put an official Terminus dislike on this record on Relapse.
Oh yeah, this is so fucking bad. And like, you know what? And I love how a minute later we get to that same shitty little tapped lead. that we
Should
ended
I leave a
on.
negative YouTube comment for the channel?
No, oh God, we don't need to go that far. That's not a good idea, but but yeah, it's just like it's terrible. And there you go. That's the verse stuff, you know? So we can't say that we're just cherry picking, you know, like one shitty part from a song. No, whole song's terrible, whole album's terrible. So let's real quick, to prove our point further, let's listen to the next minute of Christening the Afterbirth, where we pick up the speed again. Alrighty, from 150, let's just listen to another minute of that.
The blasty part was great.
Oh yeah. So it took a little longer to pick up speed than I thought, but it's so clear that there's so much more of a clear arc and idea.
Says something that they can keep it down tempo for a while and just keep it obviously heavy.
Yeah, it stays compelling, but new incantation with an NU can't can't get its shit together. You know, it's like we just turn into this this up-tempo rock part. And again, I want to stress to people, this is not a matter of, you know, one bad song. This is the whole album. It continuously goes through this shit.
We try to pick records for this show that are, even if we know they might not be great, are at least interesting and have things that we could potentially get excited about. And I listened to this and I thought, why am I wasting my life?
Yeah, it's a complete waste of time record, and it's like, and I think that we've basically made a decision to just to not really cover, you know, huge records like this anymore, because the reality is, I went into this knowing that it was probably going to be bad. You know what I mean? And I don't really want to do that anymore. It's kind of a waste of everybody's time. You know, I mean, because like the past 5 Incantation albums have been shitty. So it's like, you know, what am I going to do? Put another nail in the coffin? People are still going to buy these fucking records, apparently. Nobody cares. You know, so it's just like, so I think this is probably like a good place to just end our infatuation, like trying to cover a big record. Fuck it. They all suck. You know, they all suck.
Yeah. No more Relapse. No more Nuclear Blast. No more whatever.
No more Century Media. None of that shit. Yeah.
If it's, you know...
If it's good, I'd be willing to, you know?
Yeah, we obviously are willing to make sovereign exceptions whenever we want, but, yeah, I think we've tried to do this thing where we keep up, you know, it's like it's obviously our show centered on underground metal, but it's also like, oh, here's this big that people know about, let's just,
let's keep up with it. Yeah, let's keep up with the zeitgeist, you know?
The zeitgeist ain't here. The zeitgeist is in the underground, right? So,
oh yeah. So this is a real tragedy, but hopefully you in particular, listening that little bit of Onward to Gotha is like, oh, okay, so there was something to this band that's actually worth investigating.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, I think we're gonna do, for our second paywall, Wall of Shame, do you want to do Onward to Golgotha tonight?
Yeah, we can do that one.
All right, excellent.
Cool. And we'll figure one out for me. The secret is we already decided this, but you know, I'm gonna pretend.
yeah, we could have made this a little. honestly. But yeah, sometimes we could have made it more sketchy. But the word I was using was pro-wrestling, babe.
Yeah, kayfabe.
Really mad at me. You were supposed to hit me with the steel chair, right?
Oh, but I'm so much more mad at the album
like,
here.
Never. Yeah.
All right, well, fuck this. Let's move on to like really cool music on the back half of this podcast. Yeah. So let's take a quick break and then dive into like really cool shit that nobody's heard that they should have. So
time for me to go get a 6-pack.
Alrighty.
How's it going? Connor here from Oncology, and you're listening to Terminus.
Alright, we're back, and this time we've got Imha Tarikat with Sternenberster, and I think you said up at the top of the show that you found these guys because they were, like, the first EP was on Territor?
Yeah, I think, I can't remember how I initially saw it, but it was basically a Bandcamp find, and, the Territor imprint at that time, what made me, think, oh, this is probably worth checking out. And what struck me, and some other people I showed it to at the time, was that, unlike a lot of the stuff on Territor, which was kind of like a more authentic and punky take on the Orthodox thing, right? This had these kinds of big, melodic, heroic riffs, right? That were a lot like, more of an emphasis on melody, and it was a lot more like kind of Migla, and that kind of stood out from the pack. And it was an eccentric sound. I might have mentioned this a bit at the beginning of the show, but it was the first EP came off like it had these big epic riffs, but it also had a lot of sort of punky, almost Motorhead double bass parts, and lots of kind of fuzzy, very warm, fuzzy guitar tone. Very sort of like an immersive and welcoming sound, which is unusual.
Yeah.
And at times the chording sounded almost like Sonic Youth kind of stuff, which is, those ways of forming chords in general have always been a part of black metal. And I doubt had any immediate influence from that sort of scene, but the way Sonic Youth does it is very, the note choice is very different, right? So there was kind of an interesting convergence of sort of punky stuff on the one hand, but also very kind of epic heavy metal, black metal. And I bought that, and I bought his next one, and I've been sort of interested to see how this band develops, because there have been, I think he's working through some sort of songwriting problems that interest me, including how do you make a sound that's all climaxes?
Well, yeah, it's basically focus tested for me. It's like exactly the sort of thing. Like when I remember when I first put this album on after you set it up for this week, I think I just started laughing like 30 seconds into the first track because I thought, oh, you literally just put this on for me. You know what I mean?
Oh, buddy, yeah. It's
or so you could make fun of me. I don't know, but
oh no.
But I think you had like a sample off the first EP or something you wanted to check out?
Yeah. So, I mean, one way of describing this sound, and I think it's gotten more and more like this. This is a sample from the first EP. The sound has gotten increasingly like this over time. Less introspective, more forward. I would generally describe this band's aesthetic as alpha male spiritual ejaculation. And so let's lead off with the first track on the first record, Gray Path, which is what I would call the Leroy Jenkins of black metal.
All right, let's give that a try. Yeah, it's a pretty good statement of intent for the whole band, I would say.
Yeah, no, so if you couldn't hear what he said at the beginning, he just shouted, Imha Tarikat. And then it came in. So it's shouting the name of your band and then blasting in on some big-ass With Hearts Towards None riff is quite a statement of intent.
Yeah, and obviously, I mean, I think we're going to keep coming back to this but With Hearts Toward None is one of the prevailing influences on this record. Pretty obviously.
Yeah, and I think this stands out from the pack of post-Migla black metal in that Migla is not the only influence.
Yeah.
And that it's more sort of, it's engaged with a lot of other different strains of the tradition.
Yeah, because the other big thing that I detected, which I think you had questions about when we were talking offline about, was Spite Extreme Wing. There's a lot of sort of riffing patterns on this record that remind me a lot of their stuff, especially on Ultra or Cosmic Raid or some of their later records.
Yeah, I mean, I think, who knows whether this guy listens to SCW or not. I think there are parts that suggest that he does, and some points I wish it sounded more like that, which we can get to a little more, but I think it's, that's definitely a parallel as far as kind of florid. We talked about this kind of florid masculinity.
Yeah.
Kind of a flamboyance, a way of being manly by being kind of indulgent and excessive.
Yeah, this like Dionysian
passionate
masculinity. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's go with your sample. I think shows what's.
Okay, sure. Yeah. My note for this is, lol, big consonant riff go burr. So, you can tell that I really love a record when I don't feel the need to write a paragraph describing what I'm looking for. It's just something, haha, burr. So let's listen to this passage off Aufstieg. So for that one, I said, big consonant riff go burr, but you can basically use that description for almost every riff on this record.
Yes, there's an intense focus on... Yeah, we've talked and sometimes argued a bit on this show about music that, in this post-Migla tradition especially, that really, and also in the influence of Sargeist and some of the French chivalric BM bands, that sort of emphasizes certain kinds of big interval, sort of, neatly consonant major minor kind of stuff that has a release feeling, right?
Yeah.
And this is, but I think what's cool here, first of all, I mean, is in that first riff especially, I think those three, where you get that first sort of arcing, soaring, and then it sort of, de-escalates a little, and then you get the down tempo bit. I think the first one's my favorite, and that sort of ringing kind of chorded one, it's that's got a kind of this kind of almost not melancholy, but sort of melodramatic, kind of passionate minor feel to it. And so that's got some tension to it, even though it's a climax, and I think it's good. And unlike a lot of other Miglacore, and like Spite Extreme Wing, there's extremely physical, again, kind of manly picking, right?
Yeah.
So you're not, a lot of the Migla's remarkably technically adept, even though the music sounds kind of simple.
Mm-hmm.
And bands in that vein often play, not Migla themselves, but bands in that vein often play this very kind of polished, wannabe arena black metal.
Yeah.
Whereas this is...
Migla is kind of, like, strong but relaxed at the same time, whereas this is very, like, tight and very explosive.
Yes, they're very tight, very explosive. You can hear the playing, you can hear the sort of... everything is being overdriven, everything is going, he's playing with his elbows, right?
Yeah.
Trimming from the elbow, everything, you can hear that exuberance in it. And I think that raw energy is definitely strength here. I think, so I tried to pick a moment also where there's this effective movement from one climactic moment to the next, and you sort of, each one seems like the big, huge riff, and keeps rolling. Also, where I start the sample, this is off of Brandam Firmament, which I suppose means torch to the heavens. You would know better than me, but...
Something like that, yeah.
Torch, yeah. So, this is, or is it torch from the heavens? It's,
I think it's Torch of the Heavens.
Yeah,
I think, yeah.
So it's I've started it in the middle of a repeated riff that is already cycled for like a minute and a half. And
okay.
I really like when any band commits to a cool idea and just drones on it, convincing way. So it's already accumulated all this momentum when it comes in here.
All right, let's give that a try.
Go, yeah. Interrupting Dark Throne riff, go for.
Yeah, you chose like one of the few places with a slightly darker, like more furtive kind of melodic quality to it.
Well, especially at the end, yeah. No, there are a few places there, yeah. So I mean, at the end, yeah, you finally get this da 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 da, right, which has you get a tritone in there. So I think this highlights some characteristics of his songwriting and where his strengths are that are interesting. So, the really cool riff at the beginning, right, has this kind of, I can't remember, is contrapuntal the right word if they're moving in different times, or is it only at the same time?
Oh,
is it only like perfect parallelism?
I only pretend to know music theory.
Well, same, bro. That's why I'm asking you.
No, I honestly don't know the proper definition of that. I understand the effect that you're talking about, though.
Yeah, so he's got these two, he's got these kinds of harmonized lines that neither of which is the lead or the rhythm.
Yeah.
They're both just riffs. And he's got the sort of spiraling lead, and under it, a quote rhythm riff with chords that's just as interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And that has some tension packed in it, and especially in the way it violently moves against the current of the descending one.
Yeah.
And so it's got really cool sort of friction. And that, even though it has this glorious feeling to, you can hear this, it's very triumphant, and it's just been going and going, and the drums under it are huge, right?
Yeah.
This is a moment where I think that there seems to be this, which we could talk about a bit at the end, there seems to be this kind of, anti-cosmic mysticism vibe to this whole record, right? This sort of,
which seems very weird given the, tonal quality of this music. It seems very...
Completely agreed. However, there's a moment where, if the interest is in some kind of chaos of some sort, well, here's a moment where you've got this kind of swirling nebular sound.
Yeah.
Right? But the point is that it has this interesting structure built into it. I remember there's a Finnish death metal band called Death Chain had some great lyric that was very audible once.
I vaguely remember those guys, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like Behemoth-y, but it's just entertaining, big, chunky, hell yeah, hamburger, Black Death.
Yeah.
And then a good, very audible lyric where he's like, "There is an order in chaos." And I thought that was very memorable, and so there's a moment of order in chaos, if you like, that I think is really powerful. And, then he brings in this darker kind of hate foresty melody over it. And then at some point, the darker hate forest melody that was the lead becomes the rhythm part as he brings in that big glistening lead guitar thing. So It's like it's morphing, okay? And, the thing that was the rhythm becomes the lead, or the thing that was the lead becomes the rhythm, a new lead comes in, and then you get that solo. The solo... I think I like the rhythmic ideas there more than the note choice, but it does its work. It escalates, and then bam, you get this sort of power chord thing.
I'd agree. There's a lot of soloing on this record, and I think that's one of the weaker instances of it. Just because it does kind of just, I don't know, just kind of, it feels like it doesn't really conclude solidly. It does just kind of trail off at the end there.
I think that's a case of the bad chaos. As in, that's a case of what he wants is this kind of impulsive shoot from the hip vibe, which I think is perfectly fine and good. But in that case, maybe make the solo even simpler. You know? Because as it is, it's sort of, you can hear it, the solo's a little bit shapeless. You can hear it kind of searching for intervals. And it would be almost more effective if you just played one note and whammy barred the shit out of it.
Yeah.
Like a certain Slayer guitarist that I like.
That we always mention, yes, whenever solos are involved,
Yeah, well, and especially, there's also this really, the rhythm part after it is this really kind of almost garage rocky quality, almost like 1970 by the Stooges.
Mm-hmm.
Ron Ashton is a great, simple, expressive soloist that could also be a good model for here. But anyway, this section reminds me of something, I think what this album does really well is it produces these massive climactic moments out of extremely solid rhythm guitar playing. And cool chord ideas and riffs. And what it parallels Actually, I'll save this for the end, because we should go to one of your samples.
Okay,
So,
that's fine.
yeah.
Well,
I had a lot of thought. There were a lot of riffs there, and I had thoughts about all of them.
Well, before we move on, there are a couple things I just want to bring attention to. One being, I really love the vocal performance on this record. I love the idea of kind of fusing this hyper, just over-the-top melodic style with those very gruff, sort of like Slavic style vocals.
Yeah, and you're thinking, what by gruff Slavic style, I assume you're thinking of sort of, I am angry Slavic men yell.
This big shout.
In the Bladesburg Hall bands.
Yeah, right? In the Bladesburg Hall. And actually, what a lot of this reminds me of, especially that passage you played, I think we talked about this a little offline, is Ludo Missile from who is basically like one of the best and most influential of the Ukrainian black metal bands, but nobody gives a shit about him.
Never gets mentioned because they don't have the, quote, characteristic Slavic sound, because it sounds a lot more like a French band.
I think I would say it does sound very Slavic. It's just we have a very narrow idea of what Slavic black metal is supposed to be. You know what I mean?
Sure. No, I mean, you can hear all sorts of things linking it to those other bands. I'm just saying that there's a kind of the kind of flamboyant romantic melodies are those are pretty French, I think.
Yeah, I mean, they can be, but they're also like kind of harshly minimal. They've got this angular quality, almost like Prosanctus Inferi from earlier in the episode.
You know what? Like, it depends on the record. It depends on the record, because I've got the big Ludomisel record for me, or Ludomusul probably.
However the fuck you pronounce it, yeah.
Yeah. What's the one with To Realize and To Overcome?
I think that... Is that Catharsis?
Probably. Let's see.
Yeah, it's Catharsis. And I think that's kind of like popularly like his biggest one.
Yeah, and so that sounds like very French, although it's also was doing it before a lot of the big French bands now.
Yeah,
this is 2006. But I have on tape one of the earlier records, and that sounds very Slavic.
Yeah, that's a lot rougher and a little bit more like that sort of post-Bladesburg stuff a lot of people would associate. But let me stick with this album for a moment. So let me throw out another sample. And if anyone's been listening to the show, they're going to hear what happens here, and they're going to immediately understand why I like it so much, because it's a specific technique that I love when it happens. So let's listen to a bit off the title track, Sternenberster.
That was the halftime metalcore breakdown.
Absolutely, because there's nothing I love more in my big consonant melodic black metal song than the halftime double bass metalcore breakdown, which I just fucking love. I mean, that's my favorite part of, old Winterfilleth songs. It's my favorite part of just a lot of this very, like, hyper-modern melodic black metal. And at this point, can we even call it a metalcore technique? It's been so thoroughly synthesized into the whole, you know what I mean?
I think I imagine most people who use it, probably including Winterfilleth, who's always your paradigm for that, right?
They were one of the first ones to do it in such a big, obvious way. I mean, people did it before.
They would all deny that it's a metalcore thing, right?
Dude, there's no fucking way. You cannot listen to the Swart Raven
No,
and not... Yeah.
No, I agree. I'm saying, like, I think...
Oh, well, like, their fans would deny it. Well, they're all fucking wrong.
The bands might deny it, too, right? I think with Winterfilleth, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah. But what's also worth pointing out is, like, the opening part with that little choppy, like, 3-measure segment they do, where it's almost like an RAC segment or an OI segment or something like that. The way, they just kind of, like, break it up with that little stompy rhythm there.
Oh, yeah, well, the sort of, the kind of... I get what you're saying in the lead. The kind of...
that
that's
little,
one of those,
like,
lead riff parts, too, right?
Yeah, just one of those, like, just straight, like, 8th note picking on kind of the lead guitar melody. You hear that in a lot of RAC or OI bands. And then at the very end there, you get what's basically an interpretation of, like, a depressive black metal riff. So there's a ton of ideas. This is a real just, like, confluence of favorite ideas from all over melodic styles of black metal and related genres. And I think that's what keeps, even though I can see the criticism of this record being that it's kind of one note in terms of mood, just the array of techniques that they use to get there keeps me interested.
Yeah, you're right that there's a lot of technique there. I think the first time we talked about that, we've talked about that particular section before. I feel like I liked it better this time around. The breakdown does outwear its welcome for me after about halfway through.
Okay.
I feel like, because it's got those kind of... But it's, but I liked it better. And I think, yeah, as far as varied technique, the sample I chose, right, too, also had pretty varied technique.
Yeah.
So I think, I think at its best, which I would say is from the, track 2 through, let's go. I mean, the first track's good too, but I'd say it really kills from track 2 through 5. I'd say this record does a really good job of sustaining this kind of epic mood through all these sorts of subtle transformations, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I'd say if there's a drawback or a weakness to this record, I'd say it's just a thing that I'd say that Imha Tarikat, I think, has been working on. And that is much, much stronger on this record, which is that there are these moments occasionally where things tend to get a little too chaotic or the wrong kind of chaos.
Yeah.
That is, for me, it'll be... And I think it's a special... So for me, there'll be times when riffs, especially lead riffs, become a little bit... lose some form or lose shape. Like, they have, you can follow them, but I want a clearer direction. And this is where I'd want it to sound more like Spite Extremewing, because Spite Extremewing has these riffs that are sort of, they're very expressive, and, in Ultra, they can go for days just on climax riffs, right?
Yeah.
But they still have this quality like they're almost chiseled out of the air, like, like a lightning bolt or something.
Yeah.
And so there's some moments here where I wish there was more of that. Is the, power relates to form, I think, even in music. And even if you want to make kind of chaotic music, maybe, and especially if you want it all to sound climactic and epic, you've got to build in tension somewhere, maybe just in cool shapes. So, like, the convulsive movement of some of these chords, I think, really helps a lot. But here, I'm going to get to a sample where I think you can hear a melody, the end of a melody that kind of is, to me, a little bit trailing off, losing form. But then it just starts to gel as soon as he anchors himself around what I think his core base as a songwriter is, which is these rhythm riffs based on pulse, simple sort of syncopated pulse. Let's hear this. This is from Kreuzpunkt der Schicksale.
All right, let's give that a try.
In dem Ruf aus der Fern. Nicht das Unity ansetzen. Herzen zusammen, Willen rüsten, Augen leuchten, Körper beben. Proklamiert die Reise! Du Sehnsucht, bringt sie ein, bringt sie ein!
After it sort of coalesces in the middle there, that to me is that fucking ripping 1-2 riff, right?
Oh, you mean where it takes a riff from like one of your favorite punk songs ever?
Indeed, yes. Devil Lock by the Misfits. That's off the Earth AD or the Earth AD Wolf's Blood sort of.
Which coincidentally I only know because Spite Extreme Wing covered it on Ultra. So we've got another like weird through line, which just means that like there's
got to be a connection.
I'm saying that kind of as a joke, not even necessarily between this band and Spite Extreme Wing, but there's a through line of these like melodic punk ideas that you know are kind of diffusing through different kind of melodic black metal ideas sort of after the fact. Just because, like, I mean, a melodic black metal band from the 90s would never even fucking consider having, you know, a Misfits riff on it, but...
yeah, that's true. Although a lot of the, yeah, that's kind of true. Well, I've said before that Vaughn is kind of the Misfits of early black metal. That the way those songs work has a similar kind of hammering 1-2 beat with just big monolithic chord changes. Yeah, the weird thing is that the stuff off Devil Lock and those other songs are sort of the least melodic the Misfits have done, but they definitely have... They're definitely not... because Danzig is such a melody-driven songwriter, they definitely still have a lot of that character. Also, a fun tidbit. I think I probably read this in American Hardcore or something years ago, but Danzig hates the late Misfits recordings. He says that he wanted it to sound like some fusion of, like the best of Motorhead and Judas Priest or something. And he wanted the songs to be basically closer to new wave of British heavy metal tempo.
Huh. That's interesting.
But that the band recorded them all while he was sleeping in the recording. They weren't getting, he wasn't getting along with Jerry Only at that point. And they just recorded everything overnight way fast. And so inadvertently made the best Misfits recordings.
Well, yeah, inadvertently made the shit that's kind of the most important versus, this like doo-wop punk of, the first EP and stuff.
Which is totally fun and good, but sort of depends on highly dependent on the Ramones, highly dependent on Elvis.
Well, yeah, it was really influential to, I don't know, the guys who are doing like psychobilly stuff now, but then you get like Wolf's Blood, which is way more influential to metal and more extreme punk stuff.
Yeah, Demonomania, right? That's extreme music. Yeah. Anyway, so that to me is a moment where this record really comes together, and then the way that he turns that, you were commenting how he turns it around into this kind of...
Again, it's sort of like an RAC or like an Oi riff where you get that, like, you're taking, you know, that drone chord from the Devilock riff, and then you're just changing up how it ends into this more kind of, like, introspective but still melodramatic direction, which is a really clever technique. I like the idea that...
It's more...
You take the tribute riff and then you morph that into something else and continue the song on from there.
Oh, yeah. And I think as far as having internal melody, to me, that chorded, quote, rhythm riff has way more melodic shape in it than the lead riff the sort of trailing tremolo riff that started that sample.
Yeah.
I hear, like, that has an arc to it. And it's simple, but it's awesome. So, I mean, any more sort of summary comments on this? I think we both like it a lot. You fucking love it.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm gonna get a shirt from this guy, presuming I can get it shipped during the, you know, perpetual corona cost that's occurring right now.
Oh, yeah, you can. Just...
Well, he specifically says on his Bandcamp, like, check whether your country can take these shipments, you know, given the situation with Deutsche Post, but... I'm just super impressed by this. And honestly, I guess a big comparison that I want to make, not stylistically, but kind of in the way he makes music, is The Committee, who we reviewed, I think a couple months ago, in that this is the kind of album where I could totally see all the criticism. I could see why people wouldn't like this, because this is another record where there's basically no rough edges. It's super smoothed off. It's really melodic and not even in kind of... It's not even like a dark record. I think it's like super happy in a large part. Or
it's
like
exuberant,
Yeah, it's exuberant. It's melancholic, but that's always with this inflection of like youthful energy to it. So I can see that, but the reality is like the craftsman's quality of how he engineers this music is just so great. I can totally listen to, 45 minutes of what is basically the same mood just because it's that skilled in the way it's implemented.
Yeah, I would say I find the riff right. I think he's still finding what his strengths are as a riff writer, but I think there's been incredible progress since the first one, and I think the thing that the committee has is just that every single riff on that record falls exactly, it's just always... Where they get it is they're always able to... Right, they have an even smoother sound than this.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? Like, in terms of production, in terms of performance, in terms of the way they're shaping the chords, and yet just every riff is in place. But here, what this guy has that drives it over the top is the insane OTT energy.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Where the committee is very focused on having this kind of grand magisterial reserve, right? Like,
yeah, that's true.
It's really heavy, but you never hear them sweat, right? Whereas
they kind of arrive at similar places of just this, like, very polished, very, like... I mean, this is like an easy record to listen to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's interesting.
For me, I first put it on, and I was like, oh, sounds like another Imha Tarikat record. Sounds like pretty good. And then by the time I got to sort of like, somewhere in the second or third track, I think, and maybe in Kreuzpunkt, I started really, really gripping me. And then when that Misfits riff hit, I just went insane. Right? I was just like, yes, this is what I wanted to hear. Yes.
I can't wait to anonymously put out like a black punk record and, secretly review it on the show and just cover the whole Wolf's Blood EP, but with shrieking vocals and have you be like, oh, well, this is fucking record of the year right here.
Couldn't we record that together, bud?
Well, I mean, if you end up visiting, we could probably knock that out in an afternoon.
I think we've probably got between 10 and 20 like B+ eccentric metal projects that we could do.
Yeah, definitely.
It's like none of them would be works of we if we wanted to make something really good, if we could, it'd take a while. But I think we've got a bunch of relatively interesting throwaway projects.
Oh, definitely.
Knock out. Yeah.
All right, so I mean, I think I think that pretty much covers it. So let's take a quick break and get on to the final record of the evening. And boy, that one is a fucking doozy, as they say. So
what does doozy mean?
I don't know. I don't know what the origin of doozy is, but I think
we'll find out.
It's this record. So all right. We'll be right back. All right, last record of the night. Reverorum Ib Malacht, vad Inte Huvud, which I got clarification on the translation is, what is not seven heads? Like, you know, what isn't seven heads? You know, as a question. So, where the fuck do I even begin with this? This is, after more consideration, I think this displaced Black Funeral for top album of the year for me so far.
Yeah,
It's unbelievable, and I guess first and foremost I want to say that whatever analysis we managed to do here is not a replacement for actually listening to this thing. We've talked about this. We could do a whole, 3-hour episode just about this album. I could probably do multiple. I mean, honestly, I could write a master's thesis on this record.
Yeah, but we'd rather talk about it on a podcast.
Yeah.
And honestly, yeah, I mean, a lot of these songs are 10 or 15 minute things that you could consider in themselves, you know?
Yeah, this is a 90-minute record. And to clarify,
I did not listen to it at one sitting. I listened to it in two, but
I think that's fine. Yeah,
if you were to listen to it in one setting, it would be very taxing.
Yeah, so for clarification's sake, so it's out on Rubeus Obex, which we think might be the label of one of the guys in Reverorum, but it is also...
Are there multiple guys?
That's kind of a discussion of its own, because I think there's two core guys, but there's a bunch of people who kind of drop in and out. Supposedly there's as many as 10 people kind of involved in this. They're not very specific. They don't really care about the credits from album to album. You know what I mean?
Oh, you cut out for a minute.
They don't really care about the credits from album to album. It's just all one thing. But it's two main guys who have been in it from the beginning, who have been in projects together in the past. So, I think did you ever listen to old Reverorum stuff?
No, I didn't. I saw this on Bandcamp, and I thought, my bro, the death metal guy, used to talk about this band, and this looks strange and interesting, because it is called Roman Catholic Black Metal.
Yes, it certainly is. So, for clarification's sake, Reverorum has been around since about 2005. They did a couple demo tapes. The biggest one that's well known is called What Do You Think of the Old God? We Call Him Judas. And it got some minor acclaim in kind of the soulseek, file trading reaches of the underground, because it was, and still is, some of the weirdest and most fascinating stuff ever produced in black metal. But then, just nobody really followed up with them. They've been releasing albums at a steady pace ever since then, but just nobody really gave them the attention they deserved, and they don't really seem to care about that, you know? They're just kind of doing their own thing, plugging away with album after amazing album. But let's kind of get to the crux of it. If you're not familiar with Reverorum Ib Malacht, they are a Roman Catholic black metal band.
Real quick, weren't they originally on Ajna Productions or something? Ajna Offensive?
Yeah, they mostly worked with Ajna Offensive. I think they were personal friends with those guys. And so originally these guys were sort of like Orthodox Satanists, and they are involved with a lot of people. They're involved. I know. I can hear it when it happens.
Okay.
I'll do it. So they're involved with a lot of people from the Swedish Orthodox scene. Still good friends with a lot of those guys. So I think that's how Ajna kind of picked them up. But they're kind of guys who got so deep into Orthodox Satanism, they came out the other side as Roman Catholics, which is an interesting idea, but maybe one that's not as weird as it seems at first.
Yes, I think we'd both agree it makes a lot more sense than people might think. And they didn't change the band name, right?
No, they didn't. In fact, their first full-length record, Chaos, was written when they were Satanists, but only released after they had converted, and they changed nothing about it, because they say, oh, this is part of our history. Why would we change anything about it? This is part of the progression, spiritually.
And something that we will probably something we'll wrap around back to at the end is the question of why don't they call it unblack metal or white metal or Christian metal, right? It's Roman Catholic black metal, so where's the continuity there?
Yeah, and we're definitely going to be getting into some serious autism about some of the meta aspects of the band, but for now, let's try to just restrain it to this record. So as someone who hasn't listened to a lot of these guys, what were your impressions listening to this? Because this is a bracing fucking experience.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I guess I sort of expected it to sound something like this. I figured it would be extremely weird and abrasive. It was... here that were extremely alarming.
You cut out. Restart.
Oh, you mentioned this in your notes, but there definitely are some moments here that are extremely alarming.
Yeah.
Actually frightening, or at least surprising moments, that have to do with timing of things, but also I think with spikes in the volume.
There's a great sense of dynamics on this record.
Yes, and not just in the sense of crescendoing in the plane or in the volume levels on synths, but I think at a certain point, like, the whole volume on the track or on just the vocal or something will just spike and spook you. In a way that makes it much more like the music is, it's less like a smooth continuum that you're hanging out in or that you're sort of, that's moving through you, and much more like some external entity that's occasionally trying to get a hold of you. Right? Yeah,
you don't... This isn't a record that you listen to so much as you undergo. If you know what I mean.
That's right. Yeah.
There's a serious, like, physically taxing quality to this music. Not just through the length, but just through... the scope and the scale of repetition and the layering that goes on. This is some of the most complex music I've ever heard in metal. Just with the sheer number of layers of sound that are going on at any given time. But, so to clarify, a lot of people are going to call this industrial black metal, which is not, it's not what it is. I mean, after a fashion, this is black metal in part and also heavily industrial and electronic and ambient in parts, but it does not have any sound approximating any other band out there. Would you agree?
Pretty much, yeah. If I had to put it in an emotional territory, I would say it's sort of similar to the very demanding kind of spiritual post-industrial stuff like Coil. At least in their earlier, more abrasive moments.
That I would make a lot of comparisons to like early 20th century modernist classical music. Just with its sheer emphasis on just brutally abrasive dissonance and just like really like wearing the listener out with scale. It's so hard to quantify, though, because there's so many ideas happening on this record. It's, there
are parts that sound like different things, right? I mean, this is a record that really does exactly what it wants to do, and only that. So there are parts that sound like Radiohead, but like, not like Kid A Radiohead. not like, fucking, you know, not like, what's that one? I'm a creep, I'm a loser. Yeah. and again, it sounds like Radiohead if Radiohead was much more seriously art music and extremely lo-fi and kind of abrasive.
Yeah.
There are some very beautiful moments on it, and if you have a black metal sensibility, you won't be put off by the rough aspects of the beautiful moments, but you're also in rough aspects and rough moments here that will probably throw you for a loop, even if you listen to Ildjarn for fun.
Oh yeah. Well, let's stop talking around it and start kind of working through this. So I think you've got a sample up first from the beginning of the record.
Yeah, so this is just from the very beginning, and I think this clarifies the way that they're using the fundamental building blocks here almost aren't black metal. They're coming from industrial and electronic music, but the intent of the music is just very, very different. So here's some interesting kind of abstract electronic stuff in Bonehuset, first track.
All right, let's try that out.
So at the beginning of that sample, could you hear the wind up, that sort of acceleration in the beat, like it's going to explode? Yeah.
And then it just doesn't.
Disappears, right?
Yeah, and there's a lot of moments on this album kind of like that. Like they're preparing you for something, they're preparing you for a release of tension, and it literally never comes.
And so what's interesting about it is that it's not just... If it were just about being like, ha, you have these expectations and we're so edgy and special, we won't satisfy them. Like, you know, if that were the idea, this music would be a lot worse and it'd be very annoying. But there is something viscerally satisfying about it anyway, I think, at least if you like music like this. Like, it's, like, you can tell in the way the beats are constructed that there's been attention to god-fleshy stuff, or to the more, like,
swans. I hear a lot of swans in there, yeah.
Or the more sort of abstract jackhammer techno from, you know, stuff like from Berlin, like Ancient Methods, or from England, like Regis, whatever. That's all kind of there. The black metal guitar has just been reduced to which is cool. Yeah,
they kind of use, this is something that comes up across the album, is they kind of use, like, what would be entire black metal songs as ambient tracks pushed deep into the background. Like, and a lot of the times there will be, they're serious black metal songs, there's serious riffs going on, they could be possibly even excellent on their own, but they're completely subservient to the crazy, like, early industrial tape loops and just bizarre effects going on everywhere else. It's kind of...
the structures are not coming from black metal.
Yeah,
there are no structural principles derived from black metal here.
It's sort of like an inverted version of industrial black metal, where these are the things that it generally,
that makes sense.
Yeah, industrial black metal is like, it's black metal songs with some cool, like, machinery noises underneath. This is about the machinery noises. Yeah. This is about the machinery noises, you know what I mean?
Yes, yeah. It's about, yes, and also, the weakness of a lot of industrial black metal is, well, this is black metal, but just a lot more sort of, roboto.
Well, yeah, because most industrial black metal is actually, agro-tech black metal. It's,
oh, jeez, yeah.
It's Comic Christ. It's not Throbbing Gristle.
Yeah, the idea of industrial in it, or ministry, right?
Yeah.
Charitably, right?
This is actually Throbbing Gristle,
Yeah, let's put a 180 BPM Motorhead drum beat under it, right? Whereas, yes, this is actually, the building blocks come from industrial, and if there's any structural principle from black metal, it's maybe more like the sense of expansiveness. Some of the songs. It's but yeah, I think what's important about that is really that it is viscerally satisfying. Like when that drone comes back in, and to me, this is a really good example of just music-adjacent music in a lot of places, right? It has nothing to do with a conventional melody, nothing to do with what you expect from a riff, but it's going to give you at least some of that body feeling and some of that thing you can get your hooks in. So, to me, it seems like the most completely realized attempt I think we've talked about on this show of the kind of black metal noise industrial fusion that, say, Violette Parlesigne did, which I liked a lot. You found less satisfying, or we've talked about how Kembatinian Premaster has that.
Yeah, which is like one of my favorite albums of all time.
Yeah, and so this is... Both of those, though, are leading more from the black metal, and more from guitar. Way more, Violette Parlesigne is way more guitar. Mm-hmm. This is really a very compelling and just totally complete version of that idea.
Well, I don't get the sense... I guess I'm going out on a limb. I don't get the sense that these songs are, in their original form, constructed from notes. I think...
No, they're not, yeah.
We're dealing with something very purely abstract, where they're thinking of just sounds kind of divorced of all musical context and creating music from those things.
And from drums. I think drums and vocals are the focus of it.
Yeah, there's a big rhythmic focus, and I think it's easy for that to get lost just because there's fucking so much happening on this album. But I think
and because the drums don't sound anything like, quote, good drums.
Yeah, they kind of center it. And because there's so many kinds of drums, you've got these kind of electronic beats. You've got you've got traditional black metal drumming, you've got tape loops of drums. It's coming from all corners. And they're customized for the individual movement of this greater piece. Mm-hmm. So let's get something that sounds a little bit more like black metal. So here's a sample off At drivas av Christi Karlek och utfura Hans uppdrag.
Nice job.
Something like that, and I think that this is meant to be one of the climactic moments on the album, and this is not an album of moments at all.
No, this track is 16 minutes long, and I would say this is definitely the most important track on the record.
Yeah, so let's give this section basically at the end a listen, and I think this is going to reveal a lot of the ideas of this music, so let's try that out. holy shit, Chief.
Yeah.
And it's like, where do we begin?
I've got a note. Sunlight breaks through the one pane of stained glass in the wind-blasted coastal monastery, then dissolves in a passing cloud.
It's so this is interesting because, like, listening to it divorced of context, I could see people being like, okay, and this is like the huge climactic moment, but it really fucking is, especially if you listen to all 16 minutes of this song.
Yeah, it's about context. Like, that riff in itself, you know, if there's anything about this record that sort of reveals it as made by people who like black metal, that obviously, well, it sounds like Emperor a bit. It also really sounds like a certain moment on the Lord of the Rings soundtrack. However, when has that been a crime? And it's very competently executed. And so even it sounds really good here. So, and because the album before and after that gives you so little, it has this very big impact. And again, everything that's going around it, right? I mean, how would you even describe the noise effects playing into that?
There's so many fucking layers at every moment of this record. There's so many layers of sound going on. So I learned in an interview these guys did a few years back, this record was recorded like in 2016 or 17, and they're just getting around to releasing it now. I think what happens is the bulk of the work on their music is happening in like the post-production phases. You know, I think they are constructing this in these very discrete kind of layers or blocks, and it just takes an immense amount of time to piece together and to do all the kind of post-production work that really makes this stuff shine.
I think it's sort of what else do I have to say about this? Well, I feel like now we've sort of given them an idea of the two general extremes on this album, at least in terms of the stuff that sounds like music, right?
Yeah.
Sort of more techno moments, more kind of, or industrial moments, more kind of, well, monastic sounding moments.
Yeah.
And, you know, one thought I had with that structurally, right, is that, the music, one thing that might relate to the spiritual impulse in this, and specifically to the Christian one, is kind of, when you're listening to black metal, right, you have this feeling of the music is coming from someplace beyond you and bigger than you, but you're channeling it. It's kind of going into you, right? You kind of identify with it, and you're drawing strength from it, and for that moment, you're sort of taking on the aspect of whatever kind of, night side powers in that music.
Yeah.
Whereas it's sort of possession by the god.
Yeah.
Whereas this music very much wants to leave you alone. It's sort of, there's this kind of experience if you get, especially clawing your way towards that center of the album without even knowing it's there.
Yeah.
You'll just continually find all of your musical supports stripped away. And anything that would allow you to identify with the music sort of, in any kind of immediate way, drops out, right? The music is much more something happening to you.
This is not.
It's being inflicted on you.
Yeah, I was about to say something like that. It's like, if we're talking about traditional black metal, is about, you're channeling this power. This is the assertion of that power over you that you are defenseless against because you have no understanding of it or way to articulate it. Do you get what I'm kind of gesturing at here?
Yeah, and I yeah, so you could talk about it in terms of the difference between a sort of polytheist cosmos where you've got a sort of gradations between mortals and gods, and everything is sort of part of the world. Not that it's all fleshly and mortal or whatever, but that it's all interacting parts of this sort of cosmos, this macrocosm. Whereas there's this idea of a transcendent divinity here. That's sort of a fully transcendent divinity that's outside and utterly beyond knowing, right?
Yeah. And
on the other hand, though, the violence in the music might be the violence of, there's something kind of the sort of the way that you're sort of what do I have here? Yeah,
there's a lot of notes for this one.
Yeah, it might also be the way that this music dominates you is an experience. It could be an experience of divine power in not at all a warm and fuzzy way, which is, I think, where you were going.
Yeah, that's a whole thing. Yeah.
One other way of thinking of it is that, and it's probably both, right? Is that it's something like the people commenting on Bandcamp, 2 out of 3 of them. One guy seems to just be a Catholic. He's like, worship, 11 out of 10. Listen to on headphones. Yeah, okay. So the other commenters say, just a total hurricane of pure evil, man. And the fact that this was created by a human person is immensely upsetting to me. I was genuinely concerned that the horrors, creeping, slithering, clawing out of this record were sinking into my psyche. Just a horrific masterpiece. So
that's so interesting. Music,
yeah. Obviously, there's some complete failure to engage with the music on its own terms.
Because this is, I will say, this is some of the most personally distressing music I've heard in years. It's very uncomfortable, but not in the sense that it's there's an evil being inflicted upon you. It's
certainly not. Yeah, the simplistic way of thinking, getting out of that would be, it sounds evil because this music's about sort of the devil from a Catholic perspective, but it's certainly not that.
Yeah, it's not. It's religious music.
If there's a relation to evil, it might be something more and indirectly to the devil, it might be more how in the Middle Ages they'd meditate by sort of rehearsing the Passion of the Christ?
Yeah.
And I couldn't give you really specific examples of this, right? But you'd sort of focus on the suffering of the Savior and identify with it.
Yes.
Yeah, and so in the Christian theological tradition, there is kind of an identity between this suffering and the influence of sin or the devil, but it's basically sort of, this is the weight of the world's sin, right?
Yeah.
You're experiencing a sort of intractable moral guilt that you could never get rid of by yourself, and you experience it as suffering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that gets one thing I wanted to touch on, which is just, this is such a simple idea, but it's so crucial. The idea of we're making, Christian music, but it's not pleasant. It's not, it's not about, proselytizing. It's not about providing a friendly alternative to the sin of the world. It portrays... No,
it's not holding out, it's not trying to give you a pre-taste of redemption.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
And I think, one thing I'd like to draw a comparison to is there's a noise project, a harsh noise project called Clang Quartet. Mm-hmm. And he's, a guy who, basically he's the only, devoutly born-again Christian harsh noise artist I know of. And his stuff, I mean, if you're not super well-versed in harsh noise, basically sounds like standard harsh noise. Huge walls of static and just these incredible, abrasive, screeching noises that he's producing. But he specifically said that the whole point of it is to represent his salvation and his deliverance from a life of drug addiction and destitution through deliverance unto Christ. And that the process of this was not necessarily pleasant, that it was searing, that it was destructive in a sense. And these kind of horrible noises are a representation of that transformative process. And I think to a degree something similar might be occurring here.
Yeah, I mean, right, because in some sense, if you're sort of moving from this, if you're moving towards, from a non-religious perspective to a religious and specifically Christian and even more Catholic perspective, you're a lot of things that you may not have experienced as problems become problems. And a lot of things you may not have experienced as things you did wrong become things you're doing wrong.
Yeah.
Things wrong with you. Or you know what I mean? Like, think of it as like the pain of a immortal soul. The pain of an immortal free-willed soul immersed in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's this rupture that arises from, original sin. It's like, when do you start, like, if there's some sort of spiritual crisis you're undergoing, or I don't know, in the black metal scene, it might be like, oh God, I'm a junkie, I've got to get clean or whatever, and then you sort of find, whether you're Protestant or Catholic, you find a religion or something, right? It's suddenly a bunch of stuff that was morally neutral to you, or that you identified as good, becomes sinful.
Yeah.
And you experience the pain and the weight of that.
It recontextualizes your whole identity.
Your whole life up to that point. Right?
Within this paradigm of a value system that you have, I mean, it as in the sense of being a non-believer, that you have adopted, but in the sense of a believer that was always there, and you are culpable for those crimes that you've committed. Yeah. All of a sudden, you weren't aware of all these horrible things you'd been doing, and now you are, and that is just crushing to the spirit. Yeah,
and that's also the connection, you can think of it as, that might be the connection to a more fire and brimstone understanding of it, is something like, if you think of it as a sort of monastic chant, right? This is the pain of the centurion's lash on the backs of the martyrs, right?
Yeah.
As on the back of the Savior. Know ye not that God will inflict it on you 1,000-fold at the last judgment, right? Right, so there's this intense discipline to this album. And maybe now what we should do is start moving towards more, that we've distinguished it from a classically non-religious or satanic or whatever background. Maybe we should now start trying to look at that continuity that we both think is there.
All right, let's do that, and let me take a momentary break to smoke, and we will be back with Autism Hour.
Autism Hour. But we gotta pull some more samples too. We've got like 2 more samples we can do.
Yeah. Well, I've got one. I know you've got one. It's kind of like buried in there. Anyway, I
think there's one around 6:30 in the same song.
Oh, okay.
3 of us, where this might be useful for you too, where there's this really bad black metal riff.
Yeah.
That would be good. As far as things that are good, that sound good, there's this Driv ut des Yuka, which is really cool drum grooves, but given that we're going into the ideas, maybe playing the shitty crippled black metal riff makes more sense.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, we've got a couple more, so let me take a quick moment.
All right,
I'll be right back.
I told my girlfriend to come at 9:30, so we gotta, just do your smoke, and then we'll get it in there.
All right, and we return with
Autism Hour, or at least Autism a little while.
And,
yeah.
Because now we really need to kind of delve into the theological aspects of this. And we got a little bit more music that we'll play, but so for full disclosure, I think we've briefly mentioned this like jokingly on the show before. I actually identify sexually as a Roman Catholic. So this is very interesting to me. And you are a sort of like, how would you describe it? Pagan curious,
No, just a pagan,
Okay.
I mean, if you wanted to, Indo-European heathen tradition, pagan tradition.
Yeah.
Although definitely interested in and, respectful of other paganisms. It's,
Because we had arguments about this when I first got into Catholicism. So you've come around a lot in the intervening time period.
Yeah, I think there's all sorts of reasons. I think we'll maybe get to that if we can get to it quickly.
Yeah.
But I tried to dissuade I was like, no, death metal guy, you gotta become a Christian. I was like, I kind of get where you're coming from, but think about it, man. It's like,
Well, I guess now it comes down to, like, how does this gel with the greater black metal tradition? And I think we both agree that it kind of does very well. And I think even their path to it through this sort of Orthodox Satanism, which I think we've both kind of talked about being, in many ways, just sort of a shadow Christianity. It's kind of hard to articulate, just because, like, it seems like so much Orthodox satanic black metal is merely a very one-to-one inversion of Christianity. It's basically bad stuff is cool. You know?
Well, honestly, I'd take it one step further. So we've also got to draw a distinction between... Yeah, so there's a very glib criticism of Satanism in general and in black metal, where somebody, maybe who doesn't even listen to metal, says, well, actually... if you think about it, like, Satanists just depend on a Christian framework and invert it, so doesn't that mean that they're still Christians? And the answer to that is, maybe. I mean, there are, I think, different strains of Satanism within black metal. I would say that the kind of Satanism in, the early Norse bands is not really is not dependent on Christian terms, because it's rooted in these kinds of, there's a pagan flavor to it, and it's also rooted in these Nietzschean ideas about reevaluating the good and evil sort of axis entirely.
Yeah.
Rejecting that, right? Which doesn't mean that there wasn't a juvenile rejectionism to it.
Yeah.
Right? Of course. Yes, sure. Right, there was this sort of, everything bad is cool dimension, for sure. But the Orthodox Satanist is a very specific tradition within that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for us, I mean, let's, full disclosure, if you're an Orthodox Satanist, don't murder us. Some of these guys you can respect for the sheer intensity and seriousness of their spiritual practice.
Yeah.
Somebody like Micaiah from Ophromod clearly walks the walk. He seems like a fucking psycho.
Which is funny, because one of the guys here was with Ophromod, you know?
Oh, well, there you go. Or,
yeah.
John from Dissection was obviously a total fucking psycho, right? It's I mean, that's commitment, is just blowing your head off on principle. So there's obviously things to respect there, but I could be wrong about some of the details here, right? If you're into the technicality of this, and you find this just totally off base, write us. But the idea of it that we have is reconstructed, I think, mostly from listening to and reading the liner notes of, or the lyric notes of, or whatever, or interviews with Swedish Orthodox BM, and probably to some extent French Orthodox BM.
Yeah.
Although DSO is a very different flavor. It would seem like the Orthodox BM is it's shadow Christianity because it kind of retains the same fundamental categories, inverted. So, and not even necessarily inverted. So, what is the drama of Christianity, right?
Yeah.
At its most basic, it's the drama of a free-willed soul trapped in a meat sack.
Yeah.
And of this sort of dialectical conflict between, it's the root of dialectical philosophy. It's this sort of conflict between a transcendent spiritual plane and an earthly plane, or whatever, right? And there's this notion of spiritual freedom that in Christianity you get by transcending your mere fleshly impulses, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sort of moral self-governance. Well, it appears in Orthodox Satanism that sort of there's the same idea. It's, we're sort of shackled to the ajna plane, right? We need to sort of pierce the veil of the world of illusion.
Yeah, especially the guys who are really into more like Gnostic ideas.
Yeah, which are related to Christianity, right? Gnosticism is, the same as Orthodox is traditional Christianity, but it's related. Same with Manichaeanism. And yeah, this idea of sort of, we're shackled by the demiurge and we need to liberate the spirit. And the only thing that makes it really different from Christianity is that strangely, it often locates this transcendence not within sort of, it often identifies it with things you would consider very fleshly or earthly experiences, right? Like murdering someone, or cutting your flesh, or killing yourself, or having weird kinky sex, right? And it's these experiences that Christianity itself might identify as a sin, but there's a very similar spiritual drama going on there.
Yeah.
And so... And more specifically, I think, there's this idea that, through, there's often this eschatology related to it, right?
Yeah.
This, they say crazy shit about just, like, ending the fucking universe, or just, like, destroy all life, or whatever, which has this kind of utopian impulse that's very Christian, but more specifically, really Protestant.
Yeah, there's a very, like, tragic quality to it, Like,
how so?
Well, I guess this is where it kind of comes from the perspective of a believer to whatever degree. In that it feels like it is, in a sort of a fundamental sense, related to the same impulses that drive someone towards Christianity or Catholicism in particular. Yeah. It feels like, you're basically using the same ingredients, but you're just taking it in a different direction. And fundamentally, a lot of this, like...
Yeah, you see suffering as a huge problem and as this sort of constraint on your freedom, your spirit, and you try to get out of the trap by sort of identifying yourself with these experiences of suffering.
Well, yeah, by trying to sort of take possession or control of them by saying, actually, suffering is cool. and almost like feverishly gripping on it, like if I say it enough, I'll start to embrace this. And I think that very few ultimately ever do.
And that's where it starts to become like Catholic ascesis.
Yeah, and I think that I'm sure anyone listening to the show probably understands this, but the whole like real kind of primordial theology of Catholicism is so dramatically different from what we understand as like Protestant Christianity, which dominates the U.S. The greater mood of it is completely different. And this is very specifically a Catholic black metal record, not a Christian one. And I think it's a very important distinction to make, because a lot of the impulses and from the outside, the sort of obsessions of Catholicism are strikingly reminiscent to that of a lot of black metal. This overwhelming sense of of doom and guilt and suffering, and I think to a great degree shame. All of these ideas and these sort of like tones of mood are present in black metal, and I think it's for a reason, because I think in a large sense they are reaching towards a similar thing. Actually, there was an interview that I read with one of the main guys from Reverorum.
I think specifically in Orthodox, and maybe in CSBM.
Yeah, and, it was interesting because, Reverorum, they did an interview back in, I think, 2012 kind of talking about the Catholic black metal thing, and the guy asked him a question of, oh, how do you square the circle of doing this sort of thing? And he answered, he had a long answer that was very intelligent, but what I seized on was like a little aphorism that he had constructed at the end, where he simply said, the creator asked the created to create something for him. The created reached for a stick of wood. The creator replied negative. Even that, he argued, had he already made. So the members of Reverorum see all of black metal as a spiritual impulse towards God, even if it might be distorted or different aesthetically. They see all of it as essentially spiritual music. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, which you can't not if you're... Well, I mean, you could just say, oh, yeah, this is sinful, blah, 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 this is the devil. But, yeah, it's an interesting way of looking at it.
Well, yeah,
it's
and,
sort of,
I mean, he even
it's related to the idea in, one reading, a Christian reading of Faust would have the devil be the sort of friendly opposition to God.
Yeah.
Right?
And
like a shadow of God, an aspect of God.
Yeah,
right.
And because he says something about that. He was talking about, we talk about black metal being evil music or sinful music or, against God, but is not the reality that when you are with your friends listening to Death Crush by Mayhem, Don't You Smile? When you're listening to The Oath of Black Blood by Beharit with your friends, aren't you laughing and enjoying the social experience? So the reality that they suggest is, even in these dark, evil moments, you're still taking this very fundamental pleasure granted by God in them. So how can any of it truly be against the creator? Which is a pretty fascinating idea in a sense, like.
Mm-hmm. Well, we should play that sample real quick.
Oh yeah, let's do your sample.
So this is from the same track that sort of record. Trivos auf Christi Karlak ut for a Hans Updrag. This is from earlier in that track with a kind of Well, let's just listen to this real quick.
Sure, let's try that out.
Yeah, around the 6 minute mark, 6.5 minute mark.
All right.
Sucks ass.
Yeah, and it's clearly deliberate based on the context of the rest of the album, because there's really good black metal riffs on this album actually, but that's clearly not one of them. So what's your kind of thesis about that?
Well, you had said something about, is this record sort of Christianity dominating Satanism or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, the death metal guy has always wanted to hear this kind of fire and brimstone, sort of non-Christian black metal album or whatever. And then I thought, when I heard that part, I thought, no, he's actually right. Like, that's, like, because there's this fumbling, impotent black metal riff, right?
Yeah.
That is just surrounded by all this other noise, and that just appears as kind of, this thing that, this attempt to, this sort of, I guess, attempt to react against God's power that is just as enmeshed in the shit and misery of the world as everything else, right? Mm-hmm. It's the fleshly feebleness of somebody attempting to who believes himself to be defying heaven, right?
Yeah, there's a definite sense of humor to this music that comes out in fits and starts, and just the way in interviews they'll talk about it. They understand that some of this humor can be introduced without turning it into a joke, obviously. But they have a perspective of their greater position in black metal, so to speak.
Yeah, so to try to, I've got to go in very shortly, but to try to sort of, I think this will be an ongoing conversation, right?
Yeah,
on the show,
I think so.
I mean, we'll talk about Catholicism and black metal again. Maybe I talk about pagan stuff, sort of, a lot, but I'm sure I'll talk about it more, right? I want to revise something I said earlier. I think I was trying to map two things too closely together. The Christian impulse in Orthodox BM, could you call it Protestant? Well, not exactly. It's just sort of generically Christian, and as you pointed out, it may be that it specifically tends Catholic. Maybe that Orthodox BM in general is tending that way. But I think it's so. Then the idea is, if there's this mockery of black metal here, right? This poking fun and this sort of distancing themselves from regular black metal in terms of the music and in terms of weird musical jokes like that. Why is it Roman Catholic black metal, right? Still black metal, and I think this gets back to maybe what the common ground this music has with, say, heathen black metal, or with legitimate satanic black metal, or anything. I think from a Christian perspective, you'd say it's the reality of sin, right? The reality of the world and the flesh.
Yeah.
Which I think is very sort of opposed to this. Yeah, you said it's tragic music, right?
Yeah.
So it's very opposed to this naively optimistic impulse that comes from Protestantism.
Yeah.
Right? Which, strangely, I mean, if you're a Calvinist, it starts by denying individual free will. But nobody can ever actually really keep to that. And it strangely ends up with this notion of, well, if you're one of the saved, you'll be transforming and redeeming the world itself, in part through your work and through just being a good moral person or whatever, right?
Yeah.
There's this eschatological tendency to it that you get in, the medieval peasant revolts before Protestant proper, like Thomas Müntzer and the Anabaptists, which DSO wrote about on their last record. You get it in sort of Milton and the Puritans and you get it in the early American Puritans trying to build the city on the hill. And then you get it in these sort of secular revolutionary movements like the Jacobins or the Communists, right? It's this sort of, that have had this profound, that don't believe in God, but have had this profound influence on creating the secular modern world.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of that Protestantism becoming secularism thing that I think this is very outside of, in the same way that I think authentically satanic BM is.
Yeah.
It's like, there's, in the Catholic world, there's the Protestant worldview, or the secular Protestant worldview attempts this total moralization of reality. Right?
Yeah.
It's like we either we can or we should try to make heaven on earth. And there's this tendency to make everything about the relationship between the individual, the particular, and God, or the universal, or everyone, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's this kind of egalitarian thing. It's this, and with Catholicism, or with kind of aristocratic Satanism, or with, paganism, right? There's a world where hierarchy is necessary, right? Where conflicts are intractable, and, where, something that should maybe be affirmed, even. And with Catholicism, maybe just the difference is there's this criterion of we envision this world of salvation beyond the world, right?
Yeah.
this world of freedom and happiness and joy or whatever. You know, this world of sort of limitless transcendence, but that always has to be related to the world. And there's not this same attempt to, there's a place for sin.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess in
you
a very...
sin and you confess.
In
right?
the simplest way to kind of equate it is that, Protestantism is focused on the closeness of humanity and the divine, whereas Catholicism...
Yeah, the immediate relationship to... Yes, yeah, for sure.
Where Catholicism is based on the separation of it.
Yes, I think. Yes, it's not your personal relationship with Jesus. Or if you get into this humanist stuff, the idea that you, in your individual or collective social being, sort of, you are the divine, right? And it's not like, then this transcendence gets attributed to humanity. Oh, who creates the world? It's humanity, right?
Yeah.
Milton has Christ create the world. And so you can see that already in there. It's, mankind was also the creator, right? Which is very different from that sample you had from that interview, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's, I don't know, man, there's a lot to explore on this record, and I think anyone listening to this should fucking give this a try. Like, it's... Because if it spawned this level of discussion among us, clearly it's worthwhile. Sort of inarguably,
Yeah.
So, with that, that's probably a good place to end it. Otherwise, we'll be talking for another 3 hours, but, real quick, to everyone who's been listening to the show, thank you so much. To anyone new, welcome. And if you enjoy this, please, like, subscribe, or, throw a comment on YouTube or Facebook or whatever.
Tell us we're full of shit. Tell us you're going to murder us.
That's perfectly fine. We appreciate all our fans. And
yeah, it's, and as we said at the beginning of the episode, by the time this is up, we will have patronage systems up on Patreon and Subscribestar.
Yes, we will. So as we get out, we were originally going to use a sample of this for the discussion, but it got away from us. So let's just give these guys a track off this album to kind of consider on their way out. This is one that I found particularly distressing, called Evangeliet.
Yes, this one scared the shit out of me.
Oh yeah, it's spooky, especially at the end. So Evangeliet gar ut. Thank you for listening, guys, and we will see you next week.
All right, peace.
Christus lever. Bedja dig om detta ska vi ta ut lever dig. Så att du räkning som en absolut dig. Lever att vi får ett rätt sätt. Vi är som en absolut dig. Livet har vi hört nämna. Det kan du bli färdig med. Och allt riktigt. Utan minne ringer på. Det kan du bli färdig med. Till det finns ett blod som renar från all synd. Och det finns en frid som bevarar hjärta och och den hjälpen måste du få om du sant ska kunna säga nu lever Kristus i mig och utövar sitt heliga herravälde. Man har ett missräkning, sorger, besvikelse, massor av gift som gjort dig mycket ont. Han är löst från greven, löst från att fråga varför, och löst av ingen tänkta på det som ligger bakom. Det är nu längre mål. Vi måste vi på ett rätt sätt villfälta på våra religiösa erfarenheter. Hur är det? Alltså erfarenheter kan få en sådan plats i vår sinnevärld att det hindrar oss att uppleva detta. Nu lever Kristus. Erfarenheter står emellan människan. Det är länge sedan jag träffade en man. Han
ta ställning i kyrkan. Jag tror att det är förklarfiat med fiat svärd. Halleluja, så går det hirstegahaya, att evangeliet går ut. Broder, kyrkobarrastegahaya, kyrkans laken, halleluja.